The horizon flickered with the warning signs. Jonah's Hale had learned to read like a second language after 6 months on Arcturus VI. Electrical discharge painted the sky in shades of violent purple, each flash accompanied by delayed thunder that rolled across the barren landscape with the weight of an oncoming apocalypse. He had approximately 40 minutes before the storm reached his position, more than enough time if he didn't waste it. Jonas finished collecting his core samples with methodical efficiency, sealing each crystalline specimen in magnetically shielded containers that would protect them from the electromagnetic chaos about to consume the region. The samples represented 3 days of survey work in the northern Badlands, and he'd be damned if he was going to lose them because he got sloppy with his timing. His portable scanner beeped insistently, displaying atmospheric data that would have sent most surveyors running hours ago. Barometric pressure dropping like a stone. Electromagnetic potential building to levels that could arc between ground and sky with enough voltage to vaporize unshielded organic matter. Wind speeds approaching 200 kilometers per hour. Standard conditions for Arcturus VI during storm season. Survey station, this is Hale. He spoke into his communicator, knowing the message wouldn't transmit until after the storm passed but recording it anyway for protocol. Samples collected from grid reference 77 alpha. Mineral composition suggests volcanic activity within the last 1,000 years, which shouldn't be possible given the planet's current geological state. Recommend follow-up survey after storm season, returning to shelter now. He secured his equipment with practice speed, loaded everything onto his hoversled, and activated the return navigation protocol. The sled lifted half a meter off the ground and began gliding toward his shelter, following a path he'd programmed months ago specifically for storm evacuations. The wind picked up as he traveled, carrying dust and small rocks that pinged off his environmental suit's armored exterior. Jonas leaned into the gusts, his suit's stabilization systems working overtime to keep him upright. A gust caught the hoversled wrong and nearly flipped it. He grabbed the tether and hauled it back into position with strength that would have surprised most species, but was standard for a human who'd grown up hauling equipment on high-gravity mining colonies. 30 minutes to the storm. His shelter appeared on the horizon, half buried in a rocky outcropping, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Perfect. The shelter had taken him 2 months to construct properly. The Galactic Survey Initiative provided basic emergency equipment, but Jonas had gone far beyond basic. He'd reinforced the structure with materials salvaged from 3 different abandoned survey stations. He'd installed grounding rods that extended 30 meters into the bedrock, creating a Faraday cage effect that dispersed electrical charges safely into the planet's crust. He'd insulated everything with layered composites that could withstand temperatures ranging from near absolute zero to the plasma-level heat that lightning strikes generated. Other surveyors came to Arcturus VI for short rotations, 2 weeks maximum before the psychological strain of isolation and constant storms drove them off-world. Jonas had been here for 6 months and had already filed for a contract extension. His colleagues thought he was crazy. His ex-wife would have agreed. Jonas preferred the term selectively social. He secured the hoversled in the shelter's exterior bay, transferred his samples to the interior storage, and ran through his pre-storm checklist with the kind of attention to detail that had kept him alive on a dozen hostile worlds. Seals checked, power cells charged, atmospheric recyclers functioning, emergency supplies stocked, communications array in receive-only mode to avoid attracting lightning. 20 minutes to the storm. Jonas stripped out of his environmental suit, hung it in the maintenance alcove, and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Everything was exactly as it should be. He was prepared, secure, and had nothing to do for the next 12 hours except analyze his samples and catch up on reading. Some people meditated. Jonas found peace in competent preparation. He activated the shelter's monitoring systems, watching the storms approach on his displays. The leading edge was spectacular, a wall of electrical discharge that turned the landscape into something resembling a religious vision of hell, beautiful in its way, deadly if you were stupid enough to be caught outside. Jonas pulled a ration pack from storage, something that claimed to be beef stew but tasted like salted cardboard, and activated the heating element. While it cooked, he reviewed the day's geological data, making notes for his eventual report. The volcanic indicators didn't make sense given current models of the planet's core temperature. Either the models were wrong or something interesting was happening deep underground. Both possibilities excited him more than they probably should. The shelter's walls began to hum as the storm's electromagnetic field intensified. Jonas felt the familiar prickling sensation on his skin that meant the air was becoming charged. Normal, expected, nothing to worry about. He was lifting the first spoonful of not-quite beef to his mouth when the shelter's proximity alarm activated. Jonas froze, spoon halfway to his mouth, and stared at the sensor display. The alarm was designed to detect large electromagnetic signatures or biological movement within 100 meters. During storms, it sometimes triggered on particularly intense electrical discharges. This wasn't an electrical discharge. The signature was biological, humanoid-sized, and moving fast directly toward his shelter. That was impossible. No one went outside during the storms. His shelter's location wasn't on any standard navigation maps, and there were no other survey operations scheduled within 500 kilometers. The signature kept approaching. 60 meters, 50, 40. Then came the sound. Desperate pounding on the shelter's outer hatch, barely audible over the storm's roar but rhythmic and deliberate. Someone wanted in. Jonas set down his spoon, stared at the hatch, and ran through rapid calculations. Opening the hatch during a storm meant risking electrical discharge, meant compromising the shelter's integrity, meant exposing himself to whatever or whoever was outside. But leaving someone to die in an electrical storm wasn't something his conscience would survive intact. He cursed in 3 different languages, 2 human, 1 alien, and activated the emergency airlock protocol. The outer hatch would crack open just wide enough to admit someone, then seal automatically. In theory, if the electrical interference didn't fry the automated systems. "This is going to be stupid," Jonas muttered to himself. He activated the hatch release and stood well back, one hand on the manual override in case the automation failed. The hatch cracked open. Lightning chose that exact moment to strike somewhere close, and the shelter system screamed warnings about electromagnetic surge. Then something tumbled through the gap in a shower of sparks and smoke and desperate momentum. The hatch sealed. The airlock cycled, and Jonas found himself staring at a figure in scorched military-grade environmental armor, collapsed on his floor, trailing smoke and obviously in bad shape. The armor's helmet retracted automatically, damaged systems trying to preserve oxygen, and Jonas got his first clear look at his unexpected guest. Valkyrie military, female, young, and absolutely terrified when her compound eyes focused on him and processed what she was seeing. Her mandibles clicked rapidly in patterns Jonas's translator struggled to parse, but the meaning was clear in any language. She just realized she'd taken shelter with a human, and her entire survival instinct was screaming at her that this might have been a fatal mistake. Jonas raised his hand slowly, showing empty palms in the universal gesture of non-aggression. "You're safe," he said carefully, using the Valkyrie greeting phrase he'd memorized from first contact protocols. "Storm will pass in 11 hours, then you can leave." The clicking intensified. His translator finally caught up. "Human. Shelter trapped. Error, mistake, danger." "Yeah," Jonas agreed, keeping his tone calm and his movements slow. "This is probably awkward for both of us, but the alternative was you dying out there, and I've already got enough guilt in my life without adding, let someone get electrocuted because I didn't want to share my space." She tried to stand, failed, and reached for a weapon that wasn't there anymore, lost in the storm, probably. Jonas sighed and lowered his hands. Look, I'm going to go back to eating my terrible dinner. You can stay over there and process your existential crisis about being trapped with a human. When you're ready to not die from your injuries, I've got medical supplies. No pressure. He turned his back on her, probably stupid, definitely trusting, and returned to his cooling not beef stew. Behind him, he heard rapid clicking that his translator rendered as confused distress mixed with suspicion. Outside, the storm reached full intensity, and the shelter's walls hummed with transferred energy. They had 11 hours until the storm passed. This was going to be a very long night. The first hour was an exercise in studied ignorance. Jonas ate his meal with deliberate slowness, his back carefully turned to provide his unexpected guest with the illusion of privacy. He heard her armor's power systems failing, heard the pneumatic hiss as seals released, heard her sharp intake of breath that transcended species. The universal sound of pain acknowledged when you think no one's paying attention. He didn't turn around, didn't offer help, just continued eating his terrible dinner and reviewing geological data on his tablet as if having a terrified alien soldier in his shelter was a normal Tuesday occurrence. His translator picked up quiet clicking. She was talking to herself, probably trying to establish calm contact with her squad. The storm's electromagnetic interference would make that impossible for hours yet, but he understood the impulse. When you're scared and hurt, you reach for familiar things even when logic says they won't work. Jonas finished his meal, cleaned his utensils with economical precision, and began his evening routine. Check atmospheric recyclers. Functional, review power consumption within normal parameters. Catalog the day's samples, 17 specimens showing unusual crystalline lattice formations. The temperature was dropping. Jonas had redirected auxiliary power to the electromagnetic shielding, which meant the heating systems were running at 60% capacity. Adequate for him. Humans regulated temperature well, but potentially problematic for a Valkyrie whose armor was no longer providing thermal support. He pulled one of his emergency thermal blankets from storage, walked to within 3 meters of where she huddled against the far wall, and tossed it gently in her direction without making eye contact. "You're going to freeze if you don't use that," he said conversationally, already turning back to his workstation. "Losing fingers to frostbite would be inconvenient for both of us. Me because explaining it would be a bureaucratic nightmare, you because, well, fingers are useful." He heard her rapid breathing, heard the rustle of synthetic fabric as she grabbed the blanket, heard more clicking that his translator struggled with before settling on. Why helping, human dangerous, everyone says. Jonas sat at his workstation and pulled up a 3-dimensional model of the planet's geological strata. Everyone says lots of things, doesn't make them true. Also, you're in my shelter. If I wanted you dead, I'd have just not opened the door. Much simpler. More clicking, his translator offered, logic but trust difficult. Yeah, I get that. He manipulated the 3D model, highlighting areas of interest. Trust is always difficult, especially when your entire culture tells you someone's dangerous. But here's the thing, you came to my door for help. And I'm human, which means I'm genetically predisposed to help pack members even when they're not my actual pack. Evolutionary quirk, can't really turn it off. Silence, then not your pack. No, but you asked for shelter, which temporarily makes you my responsibility. He glanced over his shoulder finally, careful to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. I'm Jonas, by the way. Since we're going to be roommates for the next 10 hours, seemed like introductions might be appropriate. She was wrapped in the thermal blanket now, her chitinous armor piled beside her, revealing the purple-black exoskeleton underneath. Her long ears, the only feature that consistently unsettled him about Valkyrie physiology, being so elongated and mobile, were pinned flat against her head in what he'd learned indicated fear or stress. Kira, she said finally, her clicks rendered by the translator with careful pronunciation. Scout, 3rd Division, Family Vexon. Pleasure to meet you, Kira of Family Vexon. I'd offer you coffee, but I'm pretty sure your biology can't process it, and I've been told watching humans drink it is disturbing anyway. Her mandibles twitched. The translator offered no interpretation, but Jonas thought it might have been amusement. The second hour was easier. Kira remained against her wall, Jonas remained at his workstation, but the silence between them felt less hostile, more like a truce negotiated through mutual exhaustion. What you do here? Kira asked eventually. This world very dangerous, why human choose this? Xenogeology, Jonas replied, highlighting a particularly interesting mineral deposit in his model. Study of alien geology. Arcturus VI has these amazing crystalline formations that only form under specific conditions of extreme electromagnetic stress. Nowhere else in the surveyed galaxy has quite the same combination of factors. You risk death for rocks. I risk inconvenience for scientific understanding, Jonas corrected. Death is pretty unlikely if you prepare properly. And yes, for rocks. Well, technically for understanding the geological processes that create these specific rock formations, which tells us things about planetary formation and evolution that we can't learn any other way. Humans are strange. We get that a lot. He zoomed in on a crystal lattice structure, admiring the mathematical precision of its formation. What about you? Why is a Velkari scout on a world your people classify as too dangerous for standard operations? Her ears twitched, surprise maybe. You know our classifications. I read briefings. Professional necessity when you're working in contested survey zones. He paused his work and turned slightly toward her, still careful to avoid direct eye contact that might seem threatening. So why are you here? Prove myself, Kira said after a long pause. Family Vexon is minor, not military dynasty. I choose scout because dangerous postings earn recognition faster. 3 years, many assignments. Still not enough. Recognition from who? Everyone, military command, family elders, myself. Her mandibles clicked in patterns that sounded frustrated. Always trying to prove worthy, always not quite enough. Jonas understood that better than he wanted to admit. Yeah, I know that feeling. Spent most of my childhood being the weird kid who liked rocks more than people. Never quite fit the expectations. Eventually stopped trying. And now I study rocks on planets where people aren't. He smiled slightly. Turns out I'm much better with geology than social dynamics. Play to your strengths, you know. The third hour brought crisis. The shelter took a direct lightning hit, a statistical improbability that Jonas had prepared for but hoped wouldn't happen. The grounding systems held, dispersing most of the energy safely into the bedrock, but several auxiliary systems went offline, including, critically, the primary heating array. Jonas was on his feet instantly, toolkit in hand, running diagnostics while alarms screamed about temperature drop and system failures. The shelter's temperature would plummet to near freezing within 20 minutes if he couldn't restore power. What happening? Kira called over the alarms. Heating's down. Lightning fried the power coupling. Jonas pulled an access panel open, revealing a tangle of circuitry and conduits that no longer glowed with active current. Need to reroute through the backup system, but the relays are fused. Going to have to replace them manually. I help. He glanced at her, still wrapped in the thermal blanket, obviously injured, definitely not at full capacity, and made a decision that went against his usual preference for working alone. Can you follow technical instructions in real time? I'm scout, technical training mandatory. Good, then I need you here. He pointed at the power distribution node. When I say switch, you're going to activate these 3 conduits in sequence. Blue, green, red, exactly that order. Wait 2 seconds between each one. She moved to the position without hesitation, dropping the thermal blanket, ignoring her injuries. her military training overriding her fear. Ready. They worked in synchronized chaos, Jonas replacing fried components while calling out instructions, Kira following them with the precision of someone whose survival had depended on executing orders correctly. The temperature continued dropping. Jonas's breath became visible. His fingers grew clumsy with cold. "Last relay," he said through chattering teeth. "On my mark. Blue, green, red, 2-second intervals, ready." "Ready. Mark." She activated the conduits perfectly. Power flowed. The heating system hummed back to life. Jonas sagged against the wall, exhausted and frozen, while Kira remained at her post until he gave the all-clear. When he finally nodded, she grabbed the thermal blanket and brought it to him without being asked. "You cold," she observed. "Humans have poor thermal regulation." "Normally adequate thermal regulation," Jonas corrected through chattering teeth. "Currently insufficient thermal regulation, because I just spent 15 minutes elbow-deep in metal conduits that were acting as heat sinks." She wrapped the blanket around his shoulders. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she sat beside him, still maintaining distance but sharing space in a way that suggested the crisis had shifted something between them. "Thank you," Jonas said, "for helping. Could have ignored the problem. Let me handle it alone." "You gave me shelter," Kira replied simply. "Pack obligation, yes. You said humans feel this. Velkari also feel. Different expression, same principle." They sat together while the heating system gradually restored comfortable temperatures, neither speaking, both processing what had just happened. Finally, Kira asked the question Jonas had been waiting for. "Other species fear humans. Say you are dangerous, unpredictable, violent, but you seem reasonable. Why the fear?" Jonas was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because we're persistent predators from a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We evolved to outlast everything: prey, predators, diseases, climate changes that drove other species extinct. We don't have natural weapons, so we made our own. We don't have armor, so we learned to endure damage that would kill most species. We're not stronger or faster or smarter than most species. We're just too stubborn to quit when quitting would be logical." He looked at her directly for the first time since she'd arrived. "And that terrifies people, because how do you fight someone who refuses to acknowledge when they're beaten? How do you predict someone whose survival strategy is, try everything until something works? We make other species uncomfortable because we don't follow the rules evolution is supposed to enforce." Kira's antennae waved in patterns Jonas was beginning to recognize as thoughtfulness. "You are saying humans are broken. Broken or adapted depending on your perspective." He smiled slightly. "We prefer adapted. Makes us sound clever rather than mildly insane." "And you are broken this way." "Oh yeah, definitely. I'm sitting in a shelter on a planet most species won't even orbit, studying rocks that form during electrical storms that can kill unshielded organic matter in seconds. If that's not persistence predator behavior, I don't know what is." Her mandibles spread, a Velkari smile he'd learned. "Then perhaps we are both broken. Velkari scout on dangerous world trying to prove worthy. Human geologist on dangerous world studying deadly rocks. Different broken, same result." "Yeah," Jonas agreed. "Maybe that's exactly it." Outside, the storm continued its violence. Inside, two beings from species that were supposed to fear each other sat together in shared warmth, discovering that broken pieces sometimes fit together better than perfect ones. The fourth hour brought something unexpected. Actual conversation beyond survival necessity. They'd moved beyond the immediate crisis, beyond the initial fear, and into the strange territory of two intelligent beings stuck together with nothing to do but talk. Kira asked about Earth, not the political Earth that joined the galactic community, but the personal Earth Jonas remembered. He told her about growing up in a small mountain town, where everyone knew everyone and his fascination with geology made him the weird kid. told her about finding his first geode at age 7 and cracking it open to discover the crystals inside. About the moment he'd realized that rocks held stories written in their structure if you knew how to read them. Your family supported this strangeness? Kira asked, her antennae tilted in curiosity. My dad thought it was weird but harmless. My mom encouraged it because she figured any hobby that kept me out of trouble was fine by her. Jonas smiled at the memory. They were good people, didn't understand why I wanted to spend my life studying rocks on hostile planets, but they supported it anyway. This is unusual. Valkyrie families have expectations. Military service or technical fields or administrative positions. Personal interest less important than family reputation. That sounds exhausting. Yes, her mandibles clicked in what Jonas was learning indicated frustration. Always performing, always proving, never simply being. Jonas understood that better than he wanted to admit. Is that why you chose scout duties? Because it was far from those expectations. I chose scout because thought it would satisfy expectations faster, Kira corrected. Dangerous assignments earn recognition, but recognition never enough. Always next test, next proof required. And now you're trapped in a shelter with a human during an electrical storm, Jonas observed. Pretty sure this wasn't in your career advancement plan. Her mandibles clicked, definitely amusement this time. No, this was not in plan. But perhaps better than plan. At least here no one watching, no one judging, just storm and rocks and strange human who talks to geology like old friend. Rocks don't judge, Jonas said seriously. Major advantage over most organic beings. The 5th hour was when Kira's injuries caught up with her. She'd been holding herself too still, her breathing too controlled, and Jonas recognized the signs of someone pushing through pain because acknowledging it meant vulnerability. Let me see the burns, he said, pulling his medical kit from storage. Not necessary, can wait for squad medical. Can wait, sure, should wait, no. He laid out supplies with practiced efficiency. Those burns are going to get infected if they're not treated properly. Valkyrie physiology is susceptible to bacterial contamination in damaged exoskeleton tissue. I know this because I read medical briefings before coming to a world where I might encounter other species in emergency situations. She stared at him with compound eyes that processed expressions he couldn't read. You prepare for helping others, even species that fear you. I prepare for everything. It's kind of my thing. He gestured at the medical supplies. Now let me do my job as the shelter's resident paranoid human who overprepares for everything, or sit there being stubborn and risk sepsis. Your choice. Kira extended her arms with the kind of reluctant trust that meant something significant. Jonas worked carefully, cleaning the burns with antiseptic that made her mandibles click in discomfort, applying regenerative gel that would accelerate her natural healing processes, securing bandages with gentle precision. You are gentle, she observed, her translator rendering her clicks with surprise. For species everyone says is violent. Violence and gentleness aren't opposites, Jonas explained, checking the bandages for proper adhesion. Humans can be both, usually are actually. We're violent when we need to protect things we care about, gentle with things we value. Same impulse, just different expressions depending on circumstances. What do you value? The question made Jonas pause. Truth, knowledge, understanding how things work, the satisfaction of solving problems through methodical analysis rather than lucky guessing. He secured the final bandage. And right now, making sure you survive long enough to get back to your squad, because you came to my shelter for help, and humans take that seriously. Pack obligation, like you said. I am not your pack. No, but you asked for shelter, which temporarily makes you my responsibility. He returned the medical supplies to storage. That's how it works for humans. Someone asks for help, we help, even when it's inconvenient. Even when the person asking is from a species that spent the last 3 years telling everyone humans are dangerous. Because the pack bond doesn't require official membership, just need. Kira's antennae waved in complex patterns. This is why other species fear you. Not violence, this. You make obligations where none should exist. You care when caring is illogical. You help when helping provides no advantage. Yeah, probably. Jonas settled back against the wall. We're broken that way. The sixth hour brought a shift in the storm's intensity. The electrical discharges grew more frequent, the shelter's walls humming with constant transferred energy. Jonas monitored his systems carefully, watching for any sign of failure, but everything held within acceptable parameters. Kira had curled into a more comfortable position, the pain medication from Jonas's medical kit finally taking effect. She was more relaxed now, her initial fear replaced by something that resembled cautious companionship. "Tell me about your research," she said. "The rocks, why they matter." Jonas needed no further invitation. He pulled up his data on the tablet, showing her the crystalline structures he'd been studying. These formations only occur under extremely specific conditions: high electromagnetic flux, specific mineral compositions, rapid cooling cycles. They're basically frozen evidence of the exact moment when multiple forces intersected perfectly. Like evidence of storm. Exactly like that, but more than just evidence. Each crystal lattice tells a story about temperature, pressure, electromagnetic intensity, even the chemical composition of the atmosphere when it formed. His enthusiasm leaked through despite his usual controlled demeanor. It's like reading a book written in geological time. Every specimen is a chapter describing conditions that existed millions of years ago. "You love this," Kira observed. "Not just interested, love." "Yeah," Jonas admitted. "Rocks are honest. They don't pretend to be something they're not. They don't perform for recognition. They just exist, holding their stories, waiting for someone patient enough to read them." "You are also this way," Kira said thoughtfully. "Honest, not performing, just existing, doing work you love." "Is that why you're more comfortable now?" Jonas asked. "Because I'm not performing." "Yes, and because you treat me like equal, not threat, not lesser species. Just person stuck in storm with another person." Her mandibles clicked in what Jonas now recognized as contentment. "Is refreshing. Usually interactions with other species involve complicated protocol, careful positioning, strategic communication. Exhausting." "Yeah, I'm not great at protocol," Jonas agreed. "Ask my previous supervisors. They'll tell you I'm professionally adequate but socially deficient." "I think you are socially adequate. Just selective about when to perform and when to be honest." "That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me antisocial." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the storm's light show through the shelter's small viewport. The electrical discharges had taken on an almost hypnotic quality, rhythmic and terrible and beautiful all at once. "Jonas," Kira said eventually, "can I ask personal question?" "You can ask. I might not answer, but you can ask. Why you choose isolation? You say you prefer rocks to people, but seems like more than preference. Seems like escape." Jonas was quiet for a long moment, deciding how honest to be. Had a marriage that didn't work. She wanted someone social, someone who could navigate political situations, someone who fit the expected patterns for human success. "I wanted to study rocks on hostile planets and be left alone. We tried for 5 years to make it work, didn't." "She could not accept who you are." "She accepted who I was. She just wanted me to be someone different." He smiled slightly. "To be fair, I probably wanted her to be someone different too. We loved each other, but we weren't compatible. So we ended it before we started hating each other. And I took contracts on frontier worlds where being antisocial isn't a bug, it's a feature." "This makes you sad." "Not anymore. Made me sad at the time. Now it just is, part of my history, part of what led me here." He glanced at her. "What about you? Why does proving yourself to your family matter so much?" "Because without recognition, I am nothing," Kira said simply. "Velkari society structured around family reputation. Low family means low starting position. Must earn each advancement through exceptional performance. Must prove again and again that worthy of consideration. That sounds like being trapped in a test that never ends. Yes, exactly this. Her antennae drooped. Sometimes wonder if recognition even possible, if family status determines outcome regardless of individual merit, if entire effort is futile performance for audience that already decided you are insufficient. Jonas recognized the exhaustion in her voice, not physical tiredness but soul-deep weariness of someone who'd been trying too hard for too long. Maybe you're trying to prove yourself to the wrong people. What you mean? Your family, your military command. They've already decided what they think about you based on circumstances you can't control. Maybe the person you need to prove something to is yourself. Maybe the recognition that matters is internal, not external. Kira's compound eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made Jonas suddenly self-conscious. This is human wisdom, or your personal philosophy. Both neither. I don't know, I'm a geologist, not a philosopher. He shrugged. But I spent years trying to be what other people wanted and it made me miserable. Started being what I actually am and life got better. Still lonely sometimes, still complicated but better, more honest. You think I should abandon family expectations. I think you should consider whether those expectations serve you or trap you. Big difference between the two. The seventh hour brought the storm's peak intensity. The shelter's walls hummed constantly now, the electromagnetic field so strong that every metal surface carried a faint static charge. Jonas and Kira sat together, no longer on opposite sides of the shelter but sharing space, sharing warmth, sharing the peculiar intimacy that only forced proximity and honest conversation can create. Jonas, Kira said quietly, I was afraid when I realized you were human. Training says humans are dangerous. Culture says humans are unpredictable. Every briefing warns about human violence, human persistence, human refusal to acknowledge limitations. I know, I've read those briefings from the other side. But you are not what briefings describe. You are gentle. You are careful. You help without expectation of reward. You talk about rocks with passion and treat injured soldier with kindness. Her antennae waved in patterns that suggested confusion mixed with revelation. Why are briefings wrong? They're not wrong, Jonas said carefully. Humans can be violent and dangerous and persistent to the point of stupidity. We've got a history that proves it, but we're also capable of gentleness and kindness and cooperation. Both things are true simultaneously. We're complicated, like most intelligent species actually. But other species are not feared the way humans are feared. Because most species evolved with clear ecological niches. They're predators or prey, strong or fast, armored or camouflaged. Humans are all of it and none of it. We're weak predators who became apex through cooperation and tool use. We're vulnerable creatures who survived by being unkillable through sheer stubbornness. We don't fit clean categories, and that makes us unpredictable. And unpredictability is terrifying. He looked at her directly. But here's what those briefings miss. Humans are also pack animals. We're wired to form bonds, to protect group members, to cooperate for mutual benefit. You came to my door asking for help, and every human instinct I have said, help pack member. Didn't matter that you're not human. Didn't matter that your species fears mine. You asked for shelter, which made you temporarily pack. And humans don't abandon pack. Kira was silent for a long moment. Then, I think perhaps briefings should include this information. Would change how species view humans. Less fear, more understanding. Would be nice, Jonas agreed. But fear is easier than understanding. Fear requires no effort. Understanding requires work. Then I choose work, Kira said firmly. Because I have spent 3 years fearing humans based on briefings. And now I have spent 8 hours with actual human, and fear seems. She searched for words. Wasteful. We could have been having this conversation months ago if I had chosen understanding over fear. Better late than never. Yes. And Jonas, thank you for shelter, for medical care, for conversation, for treating me like person rather than threat. Her mandibles spread in that smile he'd learned to recognize. You have changed my understanding of what humans are. You've changed my understanding of Velkari, Jonas replied. Turns out you're not just militaristic drones following family protocols. You're people with doubts and dreams, and the capacity for conversation that goes beyond tactical necessities. We are both learning then. Yeah, we are. The storm continued its violence outside, but inside the shelter, two beings who were supposed to fear each other had found something better than fear. Recognition of shared experience, shared struggle, shared loneliness transformed through connection into something that resembled understanding. And maybe, Jonas thought, that was more valuable than any geological discovery he'd make on this hostile planet. The 8th hour brought a settling of sorts, not physical settling, as the storm raged with undiminished fury outside, but an emotional settling between two beings who'd moved from fear through cooperation into something approaching friendship. Kira had fallen into a light rest, the pain medication and exhaustion combining to override her military training's insistence on constant alertness. Jonas watched her for a moment, noting how her antennae twitched during sleep, how her mandibles moved slightly as if she were speaking in dreams, and felt something unexpected. Protectiveness. He'd spent 6 months deliberately isolated, avoiding complications that came from caring about others. And now here he was, in a shelter on one of the galaxy's most hostile planets, feeling responsible for a Velkari soldier he'd met 4 hours ago. Humans were definitely broken. He returned to his geological analysis, cataloging the day's samples with methodical attention while occasionally checking the storm's status. 9 more hours. Then Kira could rejoin her squad, return to her life of proving herself to people who'd already decided she was insufficient, return to a culture that trapped her in expectations she'd never chosen. It seemed wasteful. Around hour 9, Kira woke with a start, her military instincts kicking in before conscious thought. She looked around rapidly, processing her location, remembering the circumstances. Her compound eyes found Jonas at his workstation, and she relaxed incrementally. Fell asleep, she said, mandibles clicking in what might have been embarrassment. Not professional. You were exhausted and injured in a secure location, Jonas replied without looking away from his analysis. Sleeping was logical. Also, you snore. Did you know that? Velkari snore. It's kind of adorable in a mildly disturbing way. I do not snore. You definitely snore. It's like clicking and whistling combined, very distinctive. Her antennae waved in what Jonas had learned was indignation, but her mandibles were spread in that smile. You are terrible. I've been told that before. She moved to sit beside him, watching his work with evident interest. You are still analyzing rocks, even during storm, even with guests to entertain. But rocks don't care about entertainment. They just want to be understood. He highlighted a particularly interesting is not uncomfortable anymore, Kira observed. Was uncomfortable when I first arrived, yes, terrified actually, but now is almost pleasant, strange but pleasant. Yeah, I was just thinking something similar. Jonas saved his analysis and turned to face her properly. I came to Arcturus VI to avoid people, spent 6 months enjoying solitude, and now I'm sitting here thinking that maybe solitude was less about preference and more about not wanting to deal with disappointment when people inevitably don't understand me. And now I'm wondering if I've been avoiding the wrong thing. Maybe the problem wasn't people. Maybe the problem was trying to fit with people who needed me to be something I'm not. He paused. You're easy to talk to. Is that a Velkari trait or you trait? Definitely me trait, Kira said, antennae waving with what might have been pride. Most Velkari are formal, protocol-focused. I am less formal, considered flaw in military culture. Another thing to prove beyond. I like it, the informality feels honest. Yes, Honest is good word for what this is. She gestured at the shelter, at them, at the strange connection they'd built during a storm. No performance. No protocol. Just two beings talking because talking is pleasant. The ninth hour was when Kira's communicator finally started receiving signals. The storm was weakening enough that electromagnetic interference no longer blocked all transmissions. Her squad's emergency beacon came through, distorted but recognizable. She activated her communicator, broadcasting her status. Scout Kira Vexon to 3rd Division. Survived storm in unexpected shelter. Injuries minor. Will rejoin at rally point when storm clears. Confirm receipt. The response came in broken bursts. Confirmed, rally point 8 kilometers, proceed when. They found each other, Kira said, relief evident in her voice. Squad survived. We'll regroup after storm. That's good, Jonas said, meaning it. You were worried about them. Yes, they are. She paused, searching for words. Not pack exactly, military unit, but yes, worried. They are first group that treated me as capable rather than proving. Would be sad if storm killed them. When the storm clears, you'll need supplies for the trek to the rally point, Jonas said, already mentally cataloging what he could provide. 8 kilometers isn't far in good conditions, but post-storm terrain is going to be rough. Fused rock formations, residual electrical charges, possible structural collapses. You know this world well. But 6 months of systematic study tends to teach you things. He pulled up a topographical map. I can plot you the safest route, mark areas to avoid, give you emergency supplies in case you hit complications. But you are helping again. Even though storm nearly over, obligation nearly complete. Yeah, well, I'm human. We're broken that way, remember. He smiled slightly. Besides, I've gotten used to having you around. Would be a shame if you died of something preventable after surviving this long. Kira's mandibles clicked in patterns his translator rendered as warm amusement. I have also gotten used to you. Strange human who talks to rocks and helps soldiers and makes terrible jokes during storms. My jokes aren't terrible, they're geology humor, very sophisticated. They are terrible, but endearing like you. The 10th hour brought a comfortable silence. They sat together watching the storm through the viewport, the electrical discharges becoming less frequent, the wind's howl dropping to a manageable roar. The worst was passing. What happens when storm ends? Kira asked quietly. I return to squad, you return to surveys. We go back to our isolated existences, yes. That's the logical outcome, Jonas agreed. You have your career to advance. I have my research to complete. We're both committed to our respective paths. But this has been, he struggled for words. Nice isn't the right word, important, significant, I don't know. I've spent 11 hours having actual conversation with someone who doesn't need me to be anything except what I am. That's rare, worth acknowledging. For me also, Kira said, her antennae waving in complex patterns. I have spent 3 years performing for recognition, proving, always proving. And here, trapped in storm with human I was trained to fear, I simply existed, talked, laughed, was myself without calculation or strategy, is. She searched for words. Is relief, like setting down heavy burden I did not realize I was carrying. So what do we do about it? I do not know. She turned to look at him directly. What do humans do when they find connection with unexpected person? Usually try to maintain it, Jonas admitted. We're pack animals. Once we bond, we try to keep the bond intact. Doesn't always work, distances, incompatible lives, all the usual complications. But we try. And you try for this. For connection with Velkari soldier who interrupted your isolation. But Jonas thought about it, really thought about it rather than giving an easy answer. Yeah, he said finally. I think I would. I came to Arcturus VI to avoid complications. But I'm realizing that maybe the right complications are worth accepting. Kira's mandibles spread in that smile he'd come to recognize and appreciate. Then perhaps we both try, maintain connection, see what happens. But how would that even work? You're military, I'm civilian researcher. You have career obligations, I have contract commitments. Communications exist, Kira pointed out. Storm delay transmissions, yes, but exist. And frontier rotations end. And she paused, her antennae waving thoughtfully. And perhaps I am tired of always proving, perhaps ready to choose assignments based on what I want rather than what earns recognition. That's a big decision. Yes, but spending Storm with honest human, who treats me like person, rather than performance makes me think perhaps big decisions are overdue. The 11th hour arrived with the storm's gradual abatement. The electrical discharges became sporadic, the wind dropping to levels that no longer threatened structural damage. Jonas's sensors confirmed what they could both see. The storm was ending. He helped Kira restore her armor to functional status, repaired what he could of the damaged systems, and loaded her with supplies for the trek to her squad. Water, high-energy rations, a backup communicator in case hers failed again. A detailed map with the safest route highlighted. You overprepare for everything, Kira observed, accepting the supplies. It's kept me alive on multiple hostile worlds, Jonas replied. Seemed worth continuing the habit. They stood at the shelter's hatch, the storm's final moments painting the sky in fading purples and golds. Kira's squad was 8 kilometers away. His research would resume tomorrow. Life would return to normal patterns. Except nothing felt quite normal anymore. Jonas hail, Kira said formally. You gave me shelter when Storm threatened. You treated injuries when I was vulnerable. You offered conversation when I expected hostility. This is debt that Velkari culture says must be repaid. No debt, Jonas replied. You helped restore my heating systems. You provided excellent conversation. We're even. Still, she pulled something from her armor, a small crystal, glowing faintly with bioluminescence. Family token. Marks you as friend to House Vexon. Is not much status as we are minor family, but means something. Means I claim connection. Jonas accepted the crystal carefully, feeling its warmth against his palm. Thank you. I don't have anything nearly as nice to give you in return. Give me communications frequency, Kira said. And promise to respond when I contact you. That is enough. He programmed his research station's emergency frequency into her communicator, the same one he'd mentioned earlier. Anytime you need shelter, or conversation, or just want to complain about military protocol and family expectations, I'll be here, probably still studying rocks and making terrible jokes. Good, her mandibles spread in that smile, because I think perhaps I will return, when Storm permits, to continue our conversation. I'd like that. She activated her armor systems, checked her heading, and prepared to leave. At the hatch, she paused. Jonas, the briefings were wrong about humans. You are not just dangerous, you are also kind, is good combination, unexpected but good. The briefings were wrong about Velkari too, Jonas replied. You're not just military drones following orders. You're people with doubts and dreams, and the ability to connect across species boundaries when you stop performing long enough to be honest. Then we both learned something during Storm. Yeah, we did. She took 3 steps toward her squad's beacon, then looked back one final time. Thank you, Jonas Hale, for shelter, for kindness, for helping me see past fear to possibility. Thank you, Kira Vexon, for reminding me that isolation is a choice, not a requirement. He watched her figure disappear into the post-storm landscape, her armor's silhouette gradually fading into the distance. The shelter felt emptier than it had in 6 months, lonelier than he remembered. Jonas stood in the doorway for a long time, holding the bioluminescent crystal she'd given him, feeling its warmth against his palm. The landscape was exactly as harsh and desolate as it had been before the storm. The work he'd come here to do remained unchanged, but somehow everything felt different. He returned to his shelter and did something he hadn't done in months. He opened a communication channel to the Galactic Survey Initiative and inquired about joint research opportunities. Specifically, research projects that might involve Velkari military scouts with geological survey experience. Because maybe Kira was right. Maybe running towards something was better than running from something. And maybe bridges between species got built not through formal diplomacy, but through 12 hours of honest conversation during an electrical storm. That evening, as the binary stars set in cascading colors across Arcturus VI's hostile sky, Jonas received a transmission. Kira had reached her squad safely. They were preparing for extraction. And then after the formal status update, "We'll contact when rotation ends. 3 months. We'll bring proper coffee supplies, learn to drink terrible human beverages, continue conversation. Promise kept." Jonas smiled, genuine, warm, the kind of smile he hadn't worn in longer than he wanted to admit. "Promise accepted," he transmitted back. "Shelter always open. Conversation always welcome. 3 months, I'll be here." Studying rocks, waiting. The galaxy was vast and full of species who feared each other, who built walls instead of bridges, who let prejudice replace understanding. But in a small shelter on a hostile planet, during a storm that should have kept two beings apart, something different had happened. Fear had transformed